Hey guys, this is Mitch with FinePoint CGI, and today we're going to talk about occlusion culling in Godot 4.0. This is a really cool feature that's really going to help step Godot forward in terms of being a good 3D engine. So the first question is, what is occlusion culling? Well, occlusion culling is culling out objects that the camera can't see. So culling means to hide or to disappear objects that the computer, or I guess the user, cannot see. And the reason why that's great and why that is helpful is, so think of it kind of like if you were in a room. You wouldn't want to render anything outside of that room unless the user could see it, because it's wasting rendering cycles. So that saves a bunch of render time and a bunch of GPU time, and it helps keep your game performant. Now, Godot has two major ways of culling. The first one is called frustum culling, and that is on at all times. So it's just there, and it just runs in the background for you, making your game perform really well. And what that is it is culling any objects or removing any objects that are not in camera view. So if you take a look at this picture here, you can see that all this is where the camera can see. So the lines is where the camera can see. And then this little squiggled out area here is the actual camera, what the camera can't see and what gets called out. So none of this stuff gets rendered, saving your system's resources. Now, the other major culling type is called occlusion culling. And occlusion culling uses rays that the camera shoots out. Think of it kind of like ray casting from the camera. And it determines if things are being touched, if it can see. So like, for instance, if it would launch out a ray, it would see the left box and the right box, but it would not see the two boxes behind this one box here. And because the camera can't see it, it would hide those boxes from being rendered, saving GPU cycles. So that's basically what occlusion culling is, and that's the two major ways occlusion culling is in Godot 4.0 currently. Now in 3.3, we have frustum culling and portal culling, and portal culling is different, and I went through that in my portal, or in one of my Godot tutorials prior, where I talked about Godot getting occlusion culling, and I think that method will get ported over here. So I'll cover that when that happens, but as of right now, that's the two ways that we can do occlusion culling in Godot, is frustum culling and occlusion culling. So now that we understand what both types of culling is, let's talk about how it works inside of Godot and how well it works inside of Godot. Okay, so I'm sitting here inside of Godot, and you can see here, this is a scene provided by Unreal Engine. I actually exported this out using my method I have for the export to Unreal Engine tutorial. I use that exact method to export this out for testing. So if you guys want to, go check that out. But this scene is really detailed, and there's a lot going on, right? And you can see my frame time is about 118 FPS and my GPU time is about 8 milliseconds or so. And this is a prime candidate for occlusion culling. If I go up and I kind of speed it up, you can see there are objects behind the world. You can see all of these objects. Look at that. All of this is being rendered while Godot is running. So if I come down here, all of this is still being rendered, even though I can't see it. When I go like this, I can't see it, but it's all still being rendered. So what can we do about that, right? Well, we can turn on occlusion culling. Now, in Godot, you have to go up to your project settings, come over here, hit advanced settings, and then scroll all the way down to rendering. And underneath rendering, you will see occlusion culling. So go ahead and click on that. And then you will see there's occlude rays per thread, which is the number of rays that your camera is going to shoot out to determine if something is going to be occlusion culled. And then you have BVH build quality, which is kind of like, if you think about cubes, right? what they do when you build your occlusion culling is you're actually dividing the world up into these cubes. And basically it's determining what cubes the objects are in, and it determins if an object is being seen or not by the camera. I know it's kind of weird, but that's basically how it works. And then we have use occlusion culling, which in this case is off. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it on, and I'm going to hit close. And you'll see that my frame rate has not changed. It is still 120 FPS. We will right click on our node and add in a child node. And we actually received a new node, and it's under node 3D and then occlusion instance 3D. So if we go ahead and double click on that and bring that in, you'll see that again, nothing has changed. But if I come over to occluder, you can see that that's empty, right? Now, how do we add one? Well, if we come up to bake occluders, we can click on that and then go ahead and name our occluder bake. And in my case, I'm just going to call it test. So we'll go ahead and hit save. And you will see that it's going to sit there and think about it for a minute. And it just finished. So suddenly you'll see, well, hold on a minute, our FPS went down, right? And our GPU time went up. Why is that? Well, the reason why it suddenly reduced our frame rate is because of all of the stuff it's rendering on the screen to show you that the occlusion culling has baked. If we actually come up here and we click on the three little dots and we shut off gizmos, you'll see that our frame rate suddenly jumps back up, right? So that's something just to keep in mind, is baking occlusion culling doesn't actually slow you down. It can slow you down, but generally speaking, if your scene is large, it's going to save you a lot of time. So if I shut off occlusion culling, you'll see the FPS drops by a good 20 FPS. But if I turn it back on, you will see that the FPS jumps up to 40 FPS, which is awesome. That's a huge boost to performance for Godot in 3D. Now, to give you guys a good example of what it does, let's go ahead and shut off occlusion culling. Come up here to the three dots, come down to what's called display overdraw and click on it. So you can see all of the stuff that Godot is rendering right now. Now, if I come up to this little eye here and I toggle visibility, you will see that suddenly it just hid a bunch of those objects that we had previously. So if I turn it on, or I guess shut it off, you can see, look at that. There's just so many objects. And then if we go ahead and click on it, suddenly most of those objects go away. And if we go back to display normal, you'll see our FPS goes back to about 140 FPS. So that's some of the coolest stuff about occlusion culling, is it really will help us with performance. And you can see, like if I rotate the camera, how the performance just gets better and better the less objects that you see. And if I were to shut off my occlusion instance, you'll see that it does generally give us a better performing game. See, I'm getting 180s. I shut that off. I'm getting into the 160s. So it really is just free performance for your game. So I definitely suggest that you try it and see what if it works out for you guys. Now, there is some caveats here. If your scene is tiny and you don't have very many objects in it, occlusion culling may take more CPU time than you would gain on the GPU, if that makes sense. So that's just something to keep in mind, and make sure that you turn on these two little monitors here to help you out with determining if it's actually worth it, which you could turn those on, by the way, right here. If you turn on view information and frame time, that will definitely help you with keeping track of what your FPS is in your game. So let's go down into the bake section here where it says mask here. Now, this mask is what layers it bakes to determine if an object is visible. So if you actually go and take a look at an object here, so if I add in a node, I add in a mesh, and I go ahead and add in a box mesh right here, I can drag this over here, and let's just put it underneath the floor, right? So if we were to bake our occlusion culling, which automatically should handle this, I think, so I should be able to go right into display overdraw, and you can see it's gone. Oh, I think Godot just crashed on me. Yep. Godot just crashed on me. Look at. So that's good news. So I'm going to reload and I will be right back. Okay, so Godot crashed and corrupted my scene. So unfortunately, I don't have what I was originally going to show you. So I guess I'll just kind of show you and we'll go from there. So if I add in a multi-mesh instance and I go ahead and add in a plane here. Actually, I think it's, they actually have a plane here. And then I will scale this up and then I'm going to control duplicate. And I'm going to change this over to a cube mesh here, or box mesh right here. And I'm going to make this smaller, something like this. And I'll pull this down below. And I'm going to move this into layer 2, not layer 1. And then I'm going to right click, add in a occluder, and I will go ahead and bake my occluder. And it says I need to save my scene. So we'll just call this tutorial scene, and I'm going to go ahead and bake my occluders, and we will save. So what you will see is if I bake my occluders and I go to display overdraw. Oh, it's not being drawn. Okay. It's because my gizmos are on. There we go. So you can see how it's not being drawn, right? Now if I go to occluder instance and then I go to bake and I shut off mask 2 and I bake, well, it looks like masking doesn't seem to be working in this build of Godot. So I'm going to go ahead and bug one of the developers and see what is going on. But the question is, what do you guys think about this new feature? Do you think that it's worth having in Godot? Do you guys think it's useful? Let me know in the comments below. But that's all I have for you guys today. So if you like this video, go ahead and hit that like button. Hey, if you dislike this video, go ahead and hit that dislike button because I am here to make content for you guys. This video was a viewer suggestion, so as always, I take your suggestions very seriously. And if you have any suggestions, go ahead and throw them in the comments below, and I'd be more than happy to add them to my list of future videos. But that's all I have for you guys today, so thank you so much again for watching, and I will see you all next time. Thanks.